Steve Bantu Biko was born in 1946 in Ginsberg, a township outside King Williamstown in South Africa. Growing up under the iron grip of apartheid, he quickly learned the meaning of inequality. His family lived under constant restrictions, where they could move, what schools they could attend, even which hospitals they could enter. Yet Biko excelled academically, and his sharp intellect earned him a place at medical school at the University of Natal. It was there, in the late 1960s, that he began to question not only the brutality of apartheid, but the psychological damage it inflicted on Black South Africans. Biko was not just a student or a political activist. He was a thinker, a strategist, and ultimately a revolutionary. He believed that apartheid's greatest weapon was not just its police or its laws. It was the way it taught Black South Africans to see themselves as inferior. This realization led him to develop the Black consciousness movement. For Biko, liberation began with the mind. He urged Black South Africans to reject the lie of inferiority and reclaim pride in their identity, culture, and humanity. His message was simple but radical. Black man, you're on your own. Biko's movement spread like wildfire on campuses and in communities across South Africa. The Black consciousness movement was born in South Africa in the late 1960s when apartheid was at its height and hope seemed dim. The African National Congress, ANC, and the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, had been banned, and many of their leaders were imprisoned on Robben Island. Into that political vacuum stepped a younger generation of activists, students, community leaders, and intellectuals who were searching for a new language of resistance. Steve Biko and his peers founded the South African Students' Organization, SASO, in 1968, breaking away from the white-dominated National Union of South African Students. They argued that Black South Africans could not rely on white liberals or multiracial organizations to bring liberation. Instead, they needed a movement led by and for Black people. Here, Black was not just a racial category. Under Black consciousness, the term included all those oppressed by apartheid, Africans, coloreds, and Indians. Biko emphasized that Blackness was about shared experience and solidarity, not just skin tone. At its core, Black consciousness was a psychological revolution. Biko argued that apartheid had dehumanized Black people, not only materially, but mentally, teaching them to internalize feelings of inferiority. The movement aimed to reverse this damage by instilling pride, self-confidence, and cultural affirmation. Slogans like "Black is beautiful" weren't just cosmetic. They were radical affirmations in a society built on telling Black people they were worth less. BCM spread beyond universities. It reached churches where the Black theology movement reinterpreted Christianity as a tool for liberation. It touched communities through clinics, literacy projects, and cultural groups. It gave ordinary people a sense that they were not powerless victims, but agents of change. Unsurprisingly, the apartheid government saw BCM as dangerous. By the mid-1970s, leaders were banned, arrested, or harassed. Yet the ideas could not be contained. They inspired the 1976 Soweto uprising, when school children rejected being forced to learn in Afrikaans. Though brutally suppressed, the uprising reignited resistance inside South Africa and drew the world's attention to apartheid's brutality. Biko played a crucial role in the struggle to dismantle white racist rule in South Africa. He was instrumental in founding the Radical South African Students Association and emerged as a prominent leader within the Black consciousness movement. Drawing inspiration from thinkers like Frantz Fanon, Paulo Freire, Malcolm X, and the U.S. Black Power movement, Biko highlighted the need to confront the internalized sense of inferiority among Black individuals. He argued that true liberation for Black people could only be achieved once they freed themselves from the psychological chains of racial oppression, famously stating that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Biko's ideas profoundly altered perceptions of the anti-apartheid struggle during a time when many leaders, including Nelson Mandela, were imprisoned and silenced. Mandela noted that Biko's work inspired oppressed people to recognize their own worth, take joy in their own humanity, and acknowledge in as equals the humanity of others. Biko's thought processes liberated minds, invigorated resistance, and revitalized a waning movement against apartheid. This resurgence coincided with the emergence of militant young activists who joined the exiled arms struggle following the Sharpeville massacre in 1960. Biko's influence shaped significant events like the massive strikes in Durban during the early 1970s and inspired the Soweto uprising in 1976, where children protested against the imposition of Afrikaans in schools, capturing global attention. As Mandela expressed, the apartheid regime was so threatened by Biko's impact that they had to kill him to prolong the life of apartheid. In 1971, Steve Biko delivered a powerful speech at a nationwide multiracial student conference where he expressed his insights on the relationship between white racism and Black consciousness. He recognized the strength that could emerge from Black solidarity. The Black consciousness movement gained significant traction among the youth and played a crucial role in igniting the Soweto uprising of 1976, which contributed to a revival of the national freedom movement.
We now come to the group that has longest enjoyed confidence from the Black world, the white liberal establishment, including radical and leftist groups. The biggest mistake the Black world ever made was to assume that whoever opposed apartheid was an ally. How many white people fighting for their version of a change in South Africa are really motivated by genuine concern and not by guilt? A white person possesses the natural passport to the exclusive pool of white privileges. Yet, at the back of his mind is a constant reminder that he is quite comfortable as things stand, and therefore should not bother about change. I am not sneering at the liberals and their involvement. Neither am I suggesting that they are the most to blame for the Black man's plight. Rather, I am illustrating the fundamental fact that total identification by white liberals with an oppressed group, Blacks, in a system that forces one group to enjoy privilege and to live on the sweat of another is impossible. The liberal must fight on his own and for himself. If they are true liberals, they must realize that they themselves are oppressed and that they must fight for their own freedom and not that of the nebulous they, Blacks, with whom they can hardly claim identification. In South Africa, political power has always rested with white society. Not only have the whites been guilty of being on the offensive, but, by some skillful maneuvers, they have managed to control the responses of the Blacks to the provocation. Not only have they kicked the Black, but they have also told him how to react to the kick. He is now beginning to show signs that it is his right and duty to respond to the kick in the way he sees fit. It may be said that on the broader political front, Blacks in South Africa have not shown any overt signs of new thinking since the banning of their political parties in 1960. The call for Black consciousness is the most positive call to come from any group in the Black world for a long time. It is more than just a reactionary rejection of whites by Blacks. The quintessence of it is the realization by the Blacks that in order to feature well in this game of power politics, they have to use the concept of group power and to build a strong foundation for this. The philosophy of Black consciousness, therefore, expresses group pride and the determination by the Blacks to rise and attain the envisaged self. At the heart of this kind of thinking is the realization by the Blacks that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Slowly, they have cast aside the morality argument, which prevented them from going it alone and are now learning that a lot of good can be derived from specific exclusion of whites from black institutions. The growth of awareness among South African blacks has often been ascribed to influence from the American Negro movement. Yet it seems to me that this awareness is a sequel to the attainment of independence by so many African states within so short a time. Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda's often quoted statement was, "Malawi is a black man's country. Any white man who does not like it must pack up and go."
The apartheid government saw Biko as a threat. By the early 1970s, he was banned, forbidden to speak publicly, publish his writing, or even meet with more than one person at a time. But silence could not contain him. His ideas spread underground, carried by students, activists, and ordinary people who had found new dignity through black consciousness. In 1976, the Soweto uprising erupted when school children protested against being forced to learn in Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor. Police opened fire, killing hundreds. Biko's movement was not the sole cause of the uprising, but his influence was unmistakable. His ideas had seeded a culture of defiance. In August 1977, Biko was arrested by security police. He was brutally interrogated, tortured, and beaten into a coma. Shackled and naked, he was driven hundreds of miles to a prison hospital where he died on September 12, 1977. He was just 30 years old. His death shocked the world. International outrage mounted, and Biko became a symbol of both apartheid's cruelty and the unbreakable spirit of resistance. Although a political cover-up ensued, the truth about his death surfaced, revealing the violent nature of the apartheid state. His demise intensified international pressure against white minority rule, ultimately contributing to the end of apartheid alongside the movement he inspired. Steve Biko didn't live long enough to write books in the conventional sense, but his speeches, essays, and interviews were collected after his death and published in two key volumes that continue to shape political thought today. The first is I Write What I Like, a collection of Biko's writings from 1969 to 1972. It's an unfiltered account of his philosophy and the birth of the Black consciousness movement. In these pages, you hear Biko's voice at its sharpest, analytical, uncompromising, and deeply committed to psychological liberation. He challenged not only apartheid, but also liberal white allies who believed they could speak for Black South Africans. For Biko, liberation meant rejecting all paternalism and affirming the right of Black people to define their own future. The second is Black consciousness in South Africa, which gathers speeches and interviews from the early 1970s. Here, Biko's ideas come alive in dialogue, and he explains Black consciousness as both a philosophy and a strategy, a way to build pride, unity, and political strength among the oppressed. These texts show him not just as a thinker, but as a leader deeply rooted in community struggle. Together, these works form the intellectual backbone of the Black consciousness movement. They remind us that Biko was not simply reacting to apartheid brutality, he was building a positive, life-affirming vision of Black identity and freedom. Being Black is not a matter of pigmentation. Being Black is a reflection of a mental attitude. That line from I Write What I Like distills the essence of Biko's philosophy. For him, Blackness was not only skin deep, it was about reclaiming dignity, self-love, and a collective will to be free. Nearly half a century later, Biko's legacy still reverberates. His insistence on mental liberation before political liberation continues to inspire movements for racial justice worldwide. Black consciousness anticipated ideas that remain urgent today: the politics of self-definition, the demand to decolonize education, and the fight against systemic racism. In South Africa, his vision of dignity and self-reliance informs ongoing struggles against inequality, corruption, and economic exclusion. Globally, movements from Black Lives Matter to decolonial activism in universities carry echoes of Biko's call to reclaim the mind. Steve Biko has often been reduced to a martyr, remembered only for his tragic death, but his life was far more than that. He left behind a philosophy, and one that insists liberation must begin within before it can transform the world without. In 2025, his words still challenge us. How do we free ourselves from the internalized chains of oppression? How do we build a future rooted in dignity and self-determination? Steve Biko lived only 30 years, but his message of Black pride and psychological liberation still speaks to us today. His struggle was not only against apartheid's laws, but against its lies, and that makes him not just a South African hero, but a global voice for freedom.